Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel JB's Lecture. I am Jui Bhattacharya and today I shall read the entire story of A Living God written by Lafcadio Hearn. Last day in my last video I gave you a summary on this particular story, but today I shall read the entire story word to word so that you can listen to the story properly, or if you are not having a copy of this story, you can have it also from here as well. Understood? So let us start. A Living God by Lafcadio Hearn. From immemorial time, the shores of Japan have been swept at irregular intervals of centuries by enormous tidal waves caused by earthquakes or by submarine volcanic action. These awful sudden risings of the sea are called by the Japanese tsunami. On the evening of June 17, 1896, a wave nearly 200 miles long struck the northeastern provinces of Miyagi, Iwate, and Aomori, wrecking scores of towns and villages, ruining whole districts, and destroying nearly 30,000 human lives. The story of Hamaguchi Gohel is the story of a like calamity which happened long before the era of Meiji on another part of the Japanese coast. He was an old man at the time of the occurrence that made him famous. He was the most influential resident of the village to which he belonged. He had been for many years its Murausa, a headman, and he was not less liked than respected. The people usually called him Oji-san, which means grandfather. But being the richest member of the community, he was sometimes officially referred to as the Hoja. He used to advise the smaller farmers about their interests or arbitrate their disputes to advance them money at need and to dispose of their rice for them on the best terms possible. Hamaguchi's big thatched farmhouse stood at the verge of a small plateau overlooking a bay. The plateau, mostly devoted to rice culture, was hemmed in on three sides by thickly wooded summits. From its outer verge, the land sloped down in a huge green concavity as if scooped out to the edge of the water, and the whole of this slope, some 3/4 of a mile long, was so terraced as to look, when viewed from the open sea, like an enormous flight of green staves divided in the center by a narrow, wide zigzag, a streak of mountain road. 90 thatched dwellings and a Shinto temple composing the village proper stood along the curve of the bay, and other houses climbed straggling up the slope for some distance on either side of the narrow road leading to the Khoja's home. One autumn evening, Hamaguchi Gohei was looking down from the balcony of his house at some preparations for a merry-making in the village below. There had been a very fine rice crop, and the peasants were going to celebrate their harvest by a dance in the court of the Ujigami. The old man could see the festival banners, Nobori, fluttering above the roofs of the solitary street, the strings of paper lanterns festooned between bamboo poles, the decorations of the shrine, and the brightly colored gathering of the young people. He had nobody with him that evening but his little grandson, a lad of 10, the rest of the household having gone early to the village. He would have accompanied them had he not been feeling less strong than usual. The day had been oppressive, and in spite of a rising breeze, there was still in the air the sort of heavy heat which, according to the experience of the Japanese peasant at certain seasons, precedes an earthquake. And presently an earthquake came. It was not strong enough to frighten anybody, but Hamaguchi, who had felt hundreds of shocks in his time, thought it was queer. A long, slow, spongy motion. Probably it was but the after tremor of some immense seismic action very far away. The house crackled and rocked gently several times. Then all became still again. As the quaking seized Hamaguchi's knee, old eyes were anxiously turned toward the village. It often happens that the attention of a person gazing fixedly at a particular spot or object is suddenly diverted by the season of something not knowingly seen at all, but a mere vague feeling of the unfamiliar in that dim outer circle of unconscious perception which lies beyond the field of clear vision. Thus, it chanced that Hamaguchi became aware of something unusual in the offing. He rose to his feet and looked at the sea. It had darkened quite suddenly and it was acting strangely. It seemed to be moving against the wind. It was running away from the land. Within a very little time, the whole village had noticed the phenomena. Apparently, no one had felt the previous motion of the ground, but all were evidently astounded by the movement of the water. They were running to the beach and even beyond the beach to watch it. No such ebb had been witnessed on that coast within the memory of living man. Things never seen before were making apparition. Unfamiliar spaces of ribbed sand and reaches of weed-hung rock were left bare even as Hamaguchi gazed. And none of the people below appeared to guess what that monstrous ebb signified. Hamaguchi Gohei himself had never seen such a thing before. But he remembered things told him in his childhood by his father's father, and he knew all the traditions of the coast. He understood what the sea was going to do. Perhaps he thought of the time needed to send a message to the village or to get the priests of the Buddhist temple on the hill to sound their big bell. But it would take very much longer to tell what he might have thought than it took him to think. He simply called to his grandson, "Tada, quick, very quick, light me a torch." Taimastu or pine torches are kept in many coast dwellings for use on stormy nights and also for use at certain Shinto festivals. The child kindled a torch at once, and the old man hurried with it to the fields where hundreds of rice stacks, representing most of his invested capital, stood awaiting transportation. Approaching those nearest the verge of the slope, he began to apply the torch to them, hurrying from one to another as quickly as his aged limbs could carry him. The sun-dried stalks caught like tinder. The strengthening sea breeze blew the blaze landward, and presently, rank behind rank, the stacks burst into flame, sending skyward columns of smoke that met and mingled into one enormous cloudy whirl. Tada, astonished and terrified, ran after his grandfather crying, "Oji-san, why? Oji-san, why?" But Hamaguchi did not answer. He had no time to explain. He was thinking only of the 400 lives in peril. For a while the child stared wildly at the blazing rice, then burst into tears and ran back to the house, feeling sure that his grandfather had gone mad. Hamaguchi went on the firing stack after stack till he had reached the limit of his field. Then he threw down his torch and waited. The acolyte of the hill temple, observing the blaze, set the big bell booming, and the people responded to the double appeal. Hamaguchi watched them hurrying in from the sands and over the beach and up from the village like a swarming of ants, and to his anxious eyes scarcely faster, for the moment seemed terribly long to him. The sun was going down, the wrinkled bed of the bay and a vast sallow speckled expanse beyond it lay naked to the last orange glow, and still the sea was fleeing toward the horizon. Really, however, Hamaguchi did not have very long to wait before the first party of succor arrived, a score of agile young peasants who wanted to attack the fire at once, but the Hoja, holding but both arms, stopped them. "Let it burn, lads," he commanded. "Let it be. I want the whole Mura here. There is a great danger, Taihinda." The whole village was coming, and Hamaguchi counted. All the young men and boys were soon on the spot, and not a few of the more active women and girls. Then came most of the older folk, and mothers with babies at their backs, and even children, for children could help to pass water. And the elders, too feeble to keep up with the first rush, could be seen well on their way up the steep ascent. The growing multitude, still knowing nothing, looked alternately in sorrowful wonder at the flaming fields and at the impressive face of their Hoja, and the sun went down. "Grandfather is mad, I am afraid of him," sobbed Tada in answer to a number of questions. "He is mad. He set fire to the rice on purpose. I saw him to do it." "As for the rice," cried Hamaguchi, "the child tells the truth. I set fire to the rice. Are all the people here?" The Kumicho and the heads of families looked about them and down the hill and made reply, "All are here, or very soon will be. We cannot understand this thing." "Kita," shouted the old man at the top of his voice, pointing to the open, "say now if I be mad." Through the twilight eastward all looked, and saw at the edge of the dusky horizon a long, lean, dim line, like the shadowing of a coast where no coast ever was, a line that thickened as they gazed, that broadened as a coastline broadens to the eyes of one approaching it, yet incomparably more quickly, for that long darkness was the returning sea, towering like a cliff and coursing more swiftly than the kite flies. "Tsunami!" shrieked the people, and then all shrieks and all sounds and all power to hear sounds were annihilated by a nameless shock heavier than any thunder, as the colossal swell smote the shore with a weight that sent a shudder through all the hills, and a foam burst like a blaze of sheet lightning. Then for an instant nothing was visible but a storm of spray rushing up the slope like a cloud, and the people scattered back in panic from the mere menace of it. When they looked again, they saw a white horror of sea raving over the place of their homes. It drew back roaring and tearing out the bowels of the land as it went. Twice, thrice, 5 times the sea struck and ebbed, but each time with lesser surges. Then it returned to its ancient bed and stayed still, raging as after a typhoon. On the plateau for a time there was no word spoken. All stared speechlessly at the desolation beneath, the ghastliness of hurled rock and naked riven cliff, the bewilderment of scooped up deep sea wreck and shingle shot over the empty site of dwelling and temple. The village was not, the greater part of the fields were not, even the terraces had ceased to exist, and of all the homes that had been about the bay there remained nothing recognizable except 2 straw roofs tossing madly in the offing. The after terror of the death escape and the stupefaction of the general loss kept all lips dumb, until the voice of Hamaguchi was heard again, observing gently, "That was why I set fire to the rice." He, their Hoja, now stood among them almost as poor as the poorest, for his wealth was gone, but he had saved 400 lives by the sacrifice. Little Tara ran to him and caught his hand and asked forgiveness for having said naughty lines, whereupon the people woke up to the knowledge of why they were alive and began to wonder at the simple, unselfish foresight that had saved them, and the headman prostrated themselves in the dust before Hamaguchi Gohei and the people after them. Then the old man wept a little, partly because he was happy and partly because he was aged and weak and had been sorely tried. My house remains, he said, as soon as he could find words automatically caressing Tada's brown cheeks. And there is room for many. Also, the temple on the hill stands, and there is shelter there for others. Then he led way to his house, and the people cried and shouted. The period of distress was long because in those days there were no means of quick communication between district and district, and the help needed had to be sent from far away. But when better times came, the people did not forget their debt to Hamaguchi Gohei. They could not make him rich, nor would he have suffered them to do so, even had it been possible. Moreover, gifts would never have sufficed as an expression of their reverential feelings towards him, for they believed that the ghost within him was divine. So they declared him a god, and thereafter called him Hamaguchi Daimyojin, thinking they could give him no greater honor, and truly no greater honor in any country could be given to mortal man. And when they rebuilt the village, they built a temple to the spirit of him and fixed above the front of it a tablet bearing his name in Chinese text of gold. And they worshipped him there with prayer and with offerings. How he felt about it, I cannot say. I know only that he continued to live in his old thatched home upon the hill with his children and his children's children, just as humanly and simply as before, while his soul was being worshipped in the shrine below. 100 years and more he has been dead. But his temple, they tell me, still stands, and the people still pray to the ghost of the good old farmer to keep them in time of fear or trouble. So here I am completing today's video. I have just read the entire story to you properly. A few Japanese words pronunciations could be a little bit changed, but otherwise the story is like that only. So bye everyone. I will come back very soon with a new video in my channel. If you are for the first time watching my videos, don't forget to visit my channel and watch other videos as well. If you like my content, do not forget to share my contents, my videos among your friends and family members, and never forget to subscribe to this channel. So bye, take care.